And now the other big question is, what do you do with Jinder Mahal moving forward on SmackDown? Because he cleaned out the division, and one of the things that's being speculated about a Survivor Series could be Brock Lesnar versus Jinder Mahal. Is it title for title? And if so, what do you think WWE does with that deal? Non-finish, merge the titles, flip a title beforehand? I don't know.
Dude, what would Gary Hart do? Because I'm thinking, well, you got Brock, he's your number one guy.
Right.
Jinder, I think the guy's done pretty damn good with his run.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's done pretty damn good. But if you're going to match these two guys up, just the way Brock went through Braun Strowman with a clean finish in a pay-per-view or two ago, which I don't recall the name of, but with an F5, one F5 in the middle without anything devastating to set that up, with Jinder being half or third the size of Braun Strowman, I don't see him having. Well, let me put it this way. That's going to be an interesting match to watch those guys work, to see what style or psychology they're going to employ. Because Brock Lesnar, whether it's an octagon or a four-sided ring, that's a bad stick of wood. And, well, yeah, I know it's a work, but I want to see these. If that's going to be the match, I want to see how they pull this off.
Well, you have the outside heaters and the Singh brothers, so you can have them kind of like King Kong knocking away the the planes on the Empire State Building. These guys can be flying off the top rope, and he's swatting them away, and then Jinder gets his stuff in and gets some heat off of that. You can have a few moving parts to that match, and you also have Paul Lee. But I think Brock, going into Houston November 19th for the Survivor Series, if they do that match, if they book that match, he's the de facto babyface. So that's going to be an interesting match to see how they get out of it. Again, because you have right now, as we record this, your SmackDown champion and your Universal champion in a match. And I mean, they could do something cheap, which would diminish the attraction and have.
Dude, I'm seeing
it
a
non-title,
DQ. I'm seeing it. Well, okay, if it's non-title, then it's non-title.
Really, it's pretty. That to me doesn't feel big, though.
No, I see it. It's going to end up in a DQ because you can't just sitting here. I'm in Nevada and I'm watching the show as much as I can. We're talking on a Monday. Monday Night Raw and SmackDown are going to happen today and tomorrow. So I don't know what's happening. But right now, with the run that Jinder's having, if you make that match, you're not going to pull that belt off of him just right now, and you're certainly not going to pull that belt off of Brock. So I'm seeing DQ or something.
Yeah, I'm seeing a DQ with someone attacking possibly Brock to set up something for the Rumble. Who, what, when, where, I don't know. Yeah, those are all the questions. I mean, we're here in October.
Well, let me ask your
show's
opinion.
over a month away.
But let me ask your opinion. You don't think they're going to take that belt off Jinder right now, do you?
No, I think with a big tour coming down the road to India later this year, that I think that they're going to keep the title on him. I mean, they could do a quick flip, sure, and he could become a two-time champion, but that diminishes the heat.
Yeah, you can't. A quick flip, to me, don't do. And first of all, I didn't even think about the big tour. But let's say the big tour wasn't going to happen. It's just as far as this point in wrestling, I just think the kid's done a good job. You just don't yank that belt off him yet. That belt, sometimes you can give that belt to people and it doesn't really help them out, but I think it's helped this guy out a lot, and he's done a good job with it.
Yeah, and you're building heat, but the question is, who are you grooming to eventually cash in those chips with? That's not clear to me at the moment. I mean, you could switch someone out, or you could bring back John Cena and he comes in and chases it. But I think that you probably want to build this to WrestleMania, and I just don't see the opponent. It's not evident to me. And maybe, of course, it will become clearer as we get closer. But right now, because of the brand split, your depth issue is a problem. But that also creates new opportunities, and we don't know who's coming in or what could be down the road. But the other thing that's interesting that weekend in Houston is the night before there's an NXT takeover, and in the main event, it's going to be the return of War Games. There's been a few War Games since WWE closed. MLW had one in 2003, and there's been a few other places that have done War Games. But this is a funky one because you have Sanity which is headed by Eric Young, and they're going to be a three-man team taking on the Undisputed Era, which is Adam Cole, Bobby Fish, and Kyle O'Reilly, and they're going to be taking on the Authors of Pain and Roderick Strong with Precious Paul Ellering in their corner. So it's a triple threat three-way in the War Games with 2 rings on the steel cage. So it's a little different than the old Dusty Rhodes version of it, but it's kind of cool to see War Games back and on the WWE Network.
God dang it. What are your thoughts on those Authors of Pain?
I think they have a long way to go. They're where they should be. They're in NXT, and I think they need some TLC. I think they've done a great job in packaging them. I think they've given them credibility with Paul Ellering, but they just need experience. That's why NXT exists. That's why WWE Performance Center exists. And in time, I think they'll be ready for the main roster, but not right now.
No, and I agree with you, but they definitely have potential. They really have a good look. They're big enough. And man, I tell you what, when they were working those tags with Dash and Dawson, and then God dang, what's that? Gargano and Ciampa.
DIY.
Yeah, DIY. Man, I tell you what, you could see that those guys were carrying them, but they were doing their part. And so I think they do have potential. They got a good look, good size. They just need more reps. So I think I'll be fine. I'll tell you what, it's interesting that they're bringing the War Games back because that's a difficult match to work, especially, back in the day. When you said War Games, you knew there was going to be blood and there was going to be buckets of it. God,
yes, gotta be.
I'll never forget that one I worked with all those guys. It was 92 or 93. And, man, I hit a good one. I had a gusher. And right there in the middle of the ring, Dustin, we did something together, and he was on top of me, pounding my head. And he looks down at me. He goes, God dang, he goes, good color. I said, thanks, as we continued. It's the things that you don't know are happening in the ring that are happening in the ring that you hear about later. But, there's a guy complimenting you on how good of a color you got. And then you're saying, hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Keep beating me up. So it's going to be interesting to see how they work that match just because I just, you can't go back to that court. But, and I can understand why, but I'm a guy who came around in the years that I did, so I can appreciate the color aspect of it. What are your thoughts on if they were to get a green light and they could just go in there with a couple of gimmicks and get some color? What would your thoughts be?
I'd rather people blade than get it hard way, which is the new in thing to do. When I see guys getting color hard way, I cringe. I'd rather see someone take a blade and slice themselves than do the hard way deal, because then you're really potentially doing damage and you have no idea what that's going to look like. Is it, it could be really great, but you also might be doing unnecessary damage, and you don't need to do that. A nice slice.
But
of
is it too barbaric to see all that blood in the ring these days? Has the wrestling or the sports entertainment crowd gotten past that, or is it too shocking to go back into that brutality is what I'm asking.
Man, that's been the debate for over 30 years. There's been Vince has waffled on it over 30 years, and he's had no color rule, and then color comes back during his hottest runs with you on top. You guys were bleeding a lot and making a lot. So I just think it's all in moderation, and you have to do it the right way. And you also, I think WWE does a phenomenal job. I mean, their meds are phenomenal. Their testing is great, so you don't have the necessary concerns you did with the old days, the Wild Wild West days, and worried about any sort of transmission issues or anything like that with it comes to HIV or all that bad stuff. So I think if you're going to do it, WWE has a really good system in place in terms of checks and balances to at least limit the liability, the risk of something bad happening. And I think we went too far deep with the color years ago. Everything was just blood, and it was just too much, and it lost its impact. I was seeing major shows, where you'd have guys getting busted open in the first or second match. It's like, man, what's happening here? Whereas I think if you do it at the right moment, it's meaningful, and a cage match should have it, and not seeing it on a cage match is kind of weird. It's not the end of the world, but I remember watching as a fan the 94 Owen Hart Bret Hart cage match at a SummerSlam, and I'm thinking, this is a good match. They got a big issue, but there was no color, and it felt it felt weird,
Right.
and to the uneducated eye, to see that, it didn't feel. Something was odd as a fan to me. It's like, this is a big confrontation, a violent match, should have a violent conclusion. And War Games, I would think you would need that too. And this match is set up where you have a nice heel faction in there. Authors of Pain they could do some damage in there, and they should do damage in there. The weird one to me is, who are the baby faces? They recently switched Sanity out of necessity to balance the roster as their babies. The Undisputed Era with Cole, Fish, and O'Reilly, they're heels. So it's a weird kind of it's weird because it's a triple threat, which is kind of a cluster in a War Games, and you have 9 guys in there, and the defined babyface role doesn't feel. Putting like Sanity as baby faces in jeopardy in that deal feels kind of funky.
Yeah, and it is funky, but to go back to your point about all the testing that they employ with, all the guys these days, and certainly before all the boxing fights, the MMA fights, I mean, there's tons of blood over there. Yeah. So the fact that, that they, I was looking past that, hey man, as long as you do your testing, I mean, everybody's cool, what's happening. Mm-hmm. So there's dude, if I was running things, I'd go back to a little bit of color on your more important angles, just because I think it's highly effective.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's like sometimes it does happen accidentally, and all of a sudden the crowd goes, ooh, and they're a little bit more engaged. I saw it firsthand with my show. We had Lawler versus Jeff Cobb, and Cobb got busted, his nose got busted open, and then you see Lawler as a UFC fighter throwing those fists. Man, all of a sudden people are really buying him. They're like, man, did he tag his nose? What happened there? There's just a little bit more energy in the arena. There's just that blood just kicks it up a notch, but it has to again be selective. You don't want to see guys pouring buckets on match 2 or 3. War Games is definitely the match to happen, and I'm glad that they're bringing back War Games. Vince, when I was there, Dusty pitched it, and Vince just like cut him off halfway through the pitch, saying, "Thanks, Dream. I think we're going to go in a different direction." And that's really, that's a lot of why they went with Elimination Chamber. Was kind of like, and that predates Dusty's time and my time there, but it was kind of like this compromise of, we'll do something big and dramatic, but not War Games. But and there was also the debate of, well, when you put 2 rings next to each other, you're cutting off a lot of seats in an arena, and the Houston arena is like your classic NBA arena. It's the Toyota Center, so it's not like you're dealing with Cowboy Stadium. I mean, it's a smaller, decent sized arena, not a stadium. So you would definitely are shaving off some seats, but maybe for NXT they figure, well, is the difference of 2,000 seats going to mean the end of the world? So I think it's worth it, and I think it's going to be a great attraction for them